Thank you. Welcome, welcome, one and all. Thank you for joining me here on this fifth episode of the 7 Steps to Overcoming Anxiety. So, I'm going to do a quick recap before we get started with today's topic. So, the first week, when we got started with this series, we talked about the stories you're playing inside your head. The second week, we talked about the cognitive behavior therapy, the 3 questions to beat anxiety. The third week, we talked about the importance of deep connection during these very strange times of social distancing. The fourth week, we talked about how to have deep sleep to bust your stress. And today, we're here to talk about how we can use the ability to essentially understand the difference between ambition and anxiety and see how those things are actually very intertwined. And we are taught at a very early age how being a go-getter is an important sign of success in your life. So before I go into today's session, I feel like, last week's session, some of you, I don't know if you stayed for that time, for that entire, we did it, it went to 2 hours, believe it or not. So I want to quickly recap the highlights of last week because, sleep is your natural stress buster. And I want to talk about the things that I shared with you, about 5 or 6 things that I said are essential in these times where we are data-driven, technology inundated. We come to a time where the human brain is not evolved to be able to take on this amount of stress and anxiety, this amount of sleeplessness, which is a God-given built-in mechanism with which we were able to, for the eons that we've been on this earth, it's a natural way for us to rejuvenate it by resting, right? So what were some of the things we talked about last time? So we talked about the importance of using the last 30 minutes when your subconscious mind is about to wake up and your conscious mind is falling asleep. Those last 30 minutes are incredibly important for you to be able to cut away from technology, for you to be able to prepare for yourself, to imagine that to be the precursor to your meditation. So the entire sleep, your subconscious mind is going to be churning on, processing, digesting as an extension of what you put in those last 30 minutes. And then I asked that you meditate. I asked that you read something. I asked you to practice affirmations. Some of you asked, where do you find them? I said, go look up my Inside Timer profile. You'll see there's a affirmation meditation I have there. If you have your own practice, great. If you follow somebody else, even better. That's okay. Whatever it is, find something positive to seed your mind before you fall asleep. Okay. The second step of that was the extension of the other side of the sleep, right? So here we are falling asleep and getting prepared for that. But remember, the subconscious mind is also awake as you're waking up from sleep. So what happens as you're waking up? The exact opposite. Your subconscious mind begins to fall asleep and your conscious mind is waking up. And these 2 times, I call it the twilight zones. These 2 times in this twilight zone, you are able to program yourself. Now, did you realize that you are not your conscious mind? You are truly a reflection of your subconscious mind, your gut instincts, your natural choices, your tendencies, your behaviors. These are driven by your subconscious mind. And these are 2 times we have the ability to actually determine that. We actually have the ability to change. We actually have the ability to influence it. I mentioned to you there is actually a psychological technique that you can practice on yourself. And I call that, it's actually a well-known term called autosuggestion. So those of us who do not want to go into therapy, we can actually self-induce. We can have self-therapy. And that's by those affirmations, those meditations before you fall asleep and as you're waking up. And then I asked you, highly, highly recommend the first hour after I wake up, I do not indulge in technology. I meditate and then I read something. That becomes like the breakfast for my soul. And then the next thing I said is never fall asleep. Step number 3, never fall asleep when you're shattered, if you've had a fight, if you've had something really devastating that has happened, if you're angry about something, change your emotional state before you fall asleep. Because like I said, I repeat the same philosophy, your sleep becomes an extension of that last few minutes. Okay, so it's important to prepare yourself to go to sleep, and it's like kind of I'm just tired and just plonk, fall like a log. Okay, so don't do that. Okay, the next thing is the importance of your eating and the space that you give before you fall asleep, right? You need to sleep on a light stomach. And typically we humans, we take anything between 2 to 3 hours for us to fully digest our food before we I can say we have a light enough stomach so you don't feel waking up groggy. As you might remember those times when you've had a late big meal, you actually feel worse off, after waking up than before you rested. Okay, so try to keep that. If you have to eat late, so some of us, we don't have, every day is not predictable. Sometimes we work late, sometimes we fly and we arrive late. Well, then what do? I made a suggestion. Those nights when you're particularly eating late than your normal time, make it a small bowl of something, make it something that's easily digestible such that your body has a chance to digest it and feel light before you actually fall asleep. Then the next suggestion, number 5, I asked you to think about determining your sleep cycle, because we all sleep in multiples of our sleep cycles. And typically an average human sleep cycle is about 90 minutes. Some of us a little bit more, some of us a little bit less. And I gave you tips and techniques on how you can find your exact sleep cycle. And somebody asked a question. I said, on an average, we sleep between multiples of 4 to 5 for an average, when all else being equal, we being adults and we're not like our brain is not developing and we're not little infants. For an average grown up, it's between 4 to 5 sleep cycles. And I also mentioned to you the 6th as kind of an extra bonus, the importance of taking a midday nap, what we often refer to as a power nap. There's incredible rewards for that, you guys. It's almost like you have a new lease of a day when you actually wake up from the little nap, and you were able to be so much more focused and so much more attentive, so much more productive. Which then brings me to today's topic, ambition or anxiety. What's really driving you? Okay, I'm going to start off with a story like I always do. So the story is set in 19th century rural Russia. There is this guy by the name of Pahom. One day, he hears his wife and his sister-in-law quarreling about what would be a better life. Will it be out there in the village on the countryside, or will it be in the city in this urban developments? And then as he's hearing this thing, this annoying quarrel that's going on, in his mind he's thinking to himself, he says, how I wish I had some land out there in the countryside. I would be so happy I could even beat the devil. I would have nothing to fear of the devil. And lo and behold, the devil is standing there right behind the stove and listening to this guy's conversation inside his mind. And he challenges him. Satan comes out and says, I am going to give you what you want, and I'm going to take it all away. And Pahom says, whatever. And he goes about his business. So as time progresses, Pahom is trying to look for land in the countryside. And he hears about these guys, a very innocent tribe called the Bashkirs. So one day he goes and approaches the Bashkirs. They have lots of land. And he tries to make a deal. And in his mind, he's trying to squeeze out every single penny that he's going to pay them. And so he tries to go and try to, get the best deal for his money. And he asks them, how much is a piece of land here? How much is an acre of land here? They say, we don't work in acres. The way we work here in this community is if you give us 1,000 rubles, you can set out and draw a line, go as far as you can take your spade and make a circle, and you come back, and whatever's inside your circle is yours. But there's one condition. You start at dawn, and you need to be back by dusk. And if you do not come back by dusk, you will forfeit your 1,000 rubles. Pahom is elated. He has never heard anything like this. And so then he's prepared. So he's getting ready to go the next day, and he sees a dream in the night. He has a dream in the night where he remembers that the Satan had spoken to him. He sees himself lying at the feet of Satan, and Satan is laughing, out of control. Anyway, so he wakes up the next morning, and right at the break of dawn, he takes his spade and starts drawing a circle. He starts dragging it, walks through the hills, far, far, far into the land. And now, by the time the sun has reached the very top, it's probably midday, he arrives at a place where he sees a beautiful meadow, and he says, wow, what if I extend even further? This hilly land is not so appropriate for agriculture. The meadows will be beautiful, so let me try to extend my property into that. And he keeps going and going and going. And he feels hungry at a point. He says, I don't want to waste time by stopping for food. Let me see how much more I can get. And he keeps pushing himself. He just keeps going and going and going. He feels thirsty after a point. He says, no, let me not stop for water, because that means it'll be taking away from the potential land that I can be inheriting and can be owning. So he just avoids that, and he keeps going and going. And then there comes a point where he can see that the sun is beginning to come down. Then he realizes, wow, I've come a long way. Now I need to start making my journey back. But he's come so far that he can't just walk. So he starts dragging his spade, and he starts running and running and running through the meadow, up through the hills and down through the hills. And as it's about to set, the sun is about to set, he can see the finishing line, and everybody's cheering him. They're cheering him. And he runs as fast as he possibly can to make it to the finish line. And he does make it to the finish line. Everybody's elated and happy to see him back. But then he falls, and he dies. And somebody picks him up, digs a grave of 6 feet, and buries him there. Folks, ask yourself this question. How much of our lives, how much of my life has been about getting more and more and more? How much of what I do is driven by this thing called ambition that I cannot ever stop, because then behind that ambition, there is a vacuum. There's a eerie silence that tells me that I'm not enough. How many people here resonate with that? When I stop doing, there is this void that seems very eerie that tells me I may not be worth it. I'm not good enough. I may be seen as a slacker. You see? Today, our education systems are teaching us to be like that, to keep wanting to achieve more, measure ourselves by the latest achievement, right? You heard about this type A personalities. Type A personalities are people who are the so-called go-getters. And a type A personality is one who his sense of self-worth, his or her sense of self-worth, will be directly proportional to the size of the last accomplishment. And I'll tell you, I am just as guilty. I am part of that tribe. Some of you heard my story a couple of weeks ago where I shared about my youth and my upbringing, my competition, my sailing career, winning the national championship, representing the country, traveling abroad, getting a full scholarship into the program. So it was always about the next thing. And then there came a point when I was about 22, and I said, oh my God, at 22, I have accomplished so much, and yet I am not happy. What is it? What am I missing? And then I had to meet that childhood friend of mine, also a super achiever, Best Young Scientist award by the president, who started doing this weird thing of meditation, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, sitting down and having plant-based diet. I said, what happened to this guy? And that fellow led me to the first meditation session. And two things, I mentioned this to you, I'll just summarize quickly. Two things that I took away from that first meditation session. Who am I? And what is my purpose on this earth? Fundamental questions that nobody, I was studying at that time in one of the best universities in the world, number one university in the world for my program. I had got an internship in my dream company. Nobody in society, nobody in corporate, nobody in education system, nobody talks about something so fundamental. So I decided to come back, and that was the beginning of my journey, which brings me here today. I started a club on campus, and I went on to conduct meditation gatherings, and my home became the next meeting place, and I soon became known as a teacher. Now, I want to tell you a small thing about the peer pressure, and it's an interesting thing about how when we grow up, you all must have heard of this. I don't know how many of you heard me say in some of the previous sessions that in India, there is this peer pressure to become either you become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a failure. Right? So I don't want to end up being a failure because none of the other things appealed to me, so I ended up becoming an engineer. 18 years of continuous education later, 11 years in corporate America later, I realized that I had completely been misaligned with my purpose in life. And so in 2012, I walked away from all of that, not really knowing, jumping off a cliff and asking myself, can I go and live? Can I go? I thought it was going to be a 2-year sabbatical. I said, can I go and do something more meaningful with these gifts that I've accumulated, this thing that I've been doing on the sides, evenings and weekends, and see if I can actually help a few people, make a small difference in any little way that I possibly can. And so that became my full-time engagement. And that sabbatical at 2 years is now 8 years later. I'm still here talking to you guys. No looking back. Now, I'll tell you, this is an interesting thing, right? So growing up, again, my upbringing in India, I'll share with you something. So they are, broadly speaking, about 4 categories of students in a class, right? So I went to a school, one of the best schools in India, and very grateful to my parents for having sent me there. And I see a very interesting stratification of this. So they are the top achievers, right? So the ones who are always in the top of the class. So the ones on the top quarter, if you will, the top 25 percentile, they end up choosing careers, the most lucrative ones, and they end up pursuing a degree in either engineering or medicine. Now, law was not that big at that time when I was growing up. The legal system in India was not really a successful career, if you will. It was just one of the things. It was a noble cause, but it wasn't by any means lucrative financially. So majority of us, the top achievers, they opted for engineering or medicine. So then, so they go and take careers in either being doctors or engineers, right? Go work for companies, what have you. Now, the second tier are the ones who go into the arts. They get a degree in commerce. And some of the high achievers in that second tier end up getting MBAs and then go on to become managers of that first group I mentioned. Right? So they become now the managers of the hospitals, managers of the companies, they're managing engineers and doctors and whoever else. Then is the third strata. So these are the ones, the real kind of the noisemakers, right? The real troublemakers, the ones who are not paying attention, skipping classes, etc. Now these guys some of them end up becoming thugs, right? Bullies, and then they grow on to become politicians, okay? They go, because you need to have a certain amount of a thick skin, right? You need to be a certain attitude for you to be able to fight through all of this and, become a politician. So they become politicians, and guess what? So when they become politicians, some of them end up becoming successful. They get elected into offices, and they become the bosses of those managers who are managing the engineers and the doctors. So you see where this is all going? Okay, now then there is the worst of the whole class. The absolute, hopeless cases. Everybody's written them off. They go on. They go on to become gurus. Okay? Put on a robe, go into the forest, have an ashram, announce themselves as spiritual teachers, come back into the city, create a beautiful temple or mandir or whatever the faith tradition may be. And then what inevitably happens is the first, second, and third group go and bow their heads in front of this fourth category. Now, as I reflect on my life, I somehow straddled the first and the fourth category. So you can make whatever you want to make of it, but somehow I've decided to be an engineer and decided that it was not my thing. And here I am, a person who's practicing self-awareness and hoping to share some of my learnings and curious along the way. But here I am talking to you guys. So it's one of those unique subsets. So what have I learned along the way? What I've learned along the way is this form of ambition is really an addiction. It's a type of an addiction. It's an addiction that says, I want more. I want a bigger status. I want to have a best of things, status, money, objects, possessions, etc. And just like any other addiction, this addiction needs a bigger dose, a bigger hit for it to sustain. It's never enough. And it's like there is a mask. There's a mask under which that these type A's, I will say that, I'll come out and, I've been telling you that I've confessed that I'm one of part of this overachieving tribe that wants more and does more and cannot get enough. And that's why, when meditation happened to me, it was like a mind-blowing realization that I've been working too much, eating too much, drinking too much, not getting enough sleep, which is interesting. So one of the things that is a direct trade for ambition is self-care. It's always the things that are most important to you, the subtle things like personal health, relationships, meaning. These are the things that end up getting sacrificed, getting completely bulldozed in this process of going and achieving, pursuing ambition. And we think that anxiety, overachievers, anxiety is like a gift. It's like our strength. But underneath that, when I fall asleep, when that pursuit for some way, shape or form, when it stops existing, when it stops pushing me, when it stops somehow, it is finished, it's over, I feel a sense of emptiness. It's almost like anxiety is one of the greatest con artists. It engages in the long haul and subtly takes credit for everything that we do. See, if it wasn't for anxiety, if it wasn't for me to push you, you would have been nothing. But at the same time, it'll be the first one to dump you when something doesn't go right, making you believe only if you did something a little differently, only if you listened to that other person, you could have succeeded. So it's like a cycle of addiction, an addiction in which your motivation is altered, your motivation is skewed, it's corrupted, taking away fundamental need for health care, self-care. Now, not all ambition is bad, right? So we need to be able to get up. Ambition does good things for us. For example, it helps us to get, ahead in school. It helps us to get ahead in career. It helps us to provide for our families. Right? These are important. So let's try and understand what is ambition that is good for you, and when does ambition become an addictive form of anxiety that is the mask that is conning you. At this very pure state, ambition is nothing but enthusiasm with a purpose. Now, if you're a young person, or if you're responsible for young people in life, I tell you, there's a very interesting statistics. The millennials are one of the most professionally and academically ambitious generation that's ever walked this planet. 57% of millennials feel that they're not going to stay in the same career that they're in right now, compared to 36% of us Gen Xers. And over a third of 18 and 24-year-olds that are in college right now feel that they're going to go on to get an advanced degree. But at the same time, this generation of millennials are some of the most anxious human beings that have ever walked on this planet. For example, the anxiety that has been studied in the average high schooler today, the anxiety in average high schooler today is equivalent to the average psychiatric patient in the 1950s. So what's working against them? Two things: stress and the youthfulness. Right? So the youth are always trying to break out of the norm. They're trying to prove themselves. They're trying to, it's the part of the rewiring brain, the need to find something extreme to be able to feel like, they feel a sense of worthiness. So a combination of stress and the youthfulness is pushing these young ones today to become that addictive, anxious overachievers. So now I'm going to share with you certain tips, whether it's for yourself or the people that you care for, certain things in which you can read into the cunningness of this ambition, this anxiety that masks itself as something that is your true purpose. Okay? So the first one I'm going to say is that understanding what are your goals, setting the right kind of goals. So fundamentally, goals can be broken down as to two categories of things. One is extrinsic achievements, right? So more money, more stuff, more status in society. Now, these extrinsic goals tend to tap away from those things, like I said, self-care, relationships, purpose. So instead, if we can ask ourselves, what are some intrinsic goals? How can I be very close to the people that I'm surrounded by? How can I build deeper bonds? We talked about that extensively a couple of weeks ago in this session. The second is, can my life have a deeper meaning? Can I live with purpose? Am I doing things? Am I aligning with my value system? And what could I be doing which will leave a greater legacy? Can I leave something behind that makes this world slightly better than when I got here? So these are some of the intrinsic goals that you can be setting for yourself. Second tip to overcome this addiction to ambition: forfeiting perfectionism. Perfectionism is like a drug. It's like the dopamine hit that keeps driving you, pushing you for more and more. Now, one of the things about a dopamine hit or any drug hit is that the same dosage is simply not going to do it. It's going to wear off. It's not, you need to be able to have a bigger hit the next time, and there's more and more, and to a point in which until you get completely sick. So perfectionism is like that. Perfectionism will drive you to become a complete anxious wreck. So instead, I suggest you embrace your situation, your skills, your circumstances, and set achievable goals. There's a lot of science to show that it's not really about, what makes one happy. It's not about really achieving goals. It's about you having the surprise of overachieving them. So if you set goals that are achievable, the chances are you might surprise yourself having gone past, well beyond that. And in that sense of unexpected goodness that you feel, there's a sense of euphoria, excitement. So think about that. Think about, how can I re-evaluate my goals so that I can feel truly fulfilled? And the third thing, connection. You all might have heard about the longest study that was ever done on this planet. It's the 75-year-old study done at Harvard, where they studied 268 human beings from the time of birth till today. It's about a 75-year-old study. And so they looked at different conditions, socioeconomic conditions, where were they born, what were the conditions in which they were raised, how were their parents, did they stay, did their families break up, what kind of neighborhoods did they grow up in, what kind of schools they attended, what kind of diet they got, etc., etc. For 75 years, some of these people have died, some of these people are old, some of them have their own grandchildren, some of them are living in retirement communities, some of them are senile. And if we had to summarize the entire study into the top thing, the top factor that determines your state of well-being, it is your relationships. And it's very interesting. So that scientist, Robert Waldinger, you can look up, he's got a beautiful TED Talk, and he explains, even in relationships, he calls out one specific type of relationship that gives us a deep sense of well-being. And that is, when you know there are many people who have your back. So it's not the number of people I'm connected with on social media, not the number of people I'm texting with, it's not the number of people I meet in a given day, but the number of people I truly know that have my back as I go out living my life, go out putting my neck out. That determines your sense of feeling comfortable, feeling cared for, right? As opposite to this feeling of empty sense of craving. You see, many a times what happens is when we don't have relationships, that vacuum, instead of us trying to go build authentic, strong, deep relationships that have your back, we instead try to go and accomplish more, do more, work harder, burn the midnight candle even further. And as a result of what? The result is that you're going to make you feel even worse. So go seek out how you can deepen the relationships, how you can go reach out and make a difference to somebody else. Like I said last week, try to go do something for somebody who you know may not ever be able to do something back for you. That's investment. That's investment in a community. So folks, I've been talking for a while, and before I get into the meditation, I have not been following, I've just focused on what I'm saying, so I have not been looking at your comments. So go ahead and ask any questions, anything that, if you think you've already asked me a question, please go ahead and repaste it here, because now I'm focusing on looking at what you're saying. Isn't quality more meaningful and satisfying than quantity? Of course it is, whoever you are, Mr. Guest or Mrs. Guest. Of course it is. So like I said, so the quality of even relationships of that people that you know subconsciously, those are the ones who have got your back. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to call them. You just know it because of your investment in that relationship for obviously for a long run, right? Is there something what we can read to reinforce your message? That's great, Kristen. This is something that I have learned. I'm sharing with you things that are my lifetime's work and my lifetime's realizations. And yes, of course, there's a thing. Okay, now, you bring up a very good question. So one of the things that I've always felt about, when I feel in my own life, like, oh my God, I'm just not measuring up to what my potential is. Here's what I do. I try to think of one of my stars, one of my legends, and I go try to pick up a autobiography or a biography of that individual. Okay? And I read that. And what that does for me is that it gives me a sense of the roller coaster ride that is life. Nobody accomplishes everything through like a straight slope, clean shot, straight curve. There's no ups and downs. There's no battles, right? We all go through trials and tribulations. One of my recent books that I've read, and it's just super, super important in shaping me, is Becoming by Michelle Obama. It's very interesting because, Michelle talks about the challenges as a family, the kind of decisions, the kind of junctures they were at different stages for that family to become who they are today. Even after they've left the White House, the values with which they've made those choices. Her role and the importance of standing by to make one of probably the greatest presidents in our history. Another one that I would highly recommend is the book by Elizabeth Gilbert called Big Magic. Now you got me started on books. I have a long list of them. I'm constantly reading. So Big Magic is about her journey where she talks about, so I don't know if you guys know who Elizabeth Gilbert is. She's the one who's the runaway success, that book which turned into a movie called Eat, Pray, Love. And she's got many other books, but that's just in which she explains how does creativity actually work, and how does she and other people like J.K. Rowling, etc., how do they tap into that creative genius, and that how each one of us has it within us. We just need methods to tap into the genius. Okay, so let's see. TED Talk name, Robert Waldinger. I think it's called The Longest Study on Earth, but Robert Waldinger. So let me just go ahead and type in his name, and that way you can just look it up. I don't remember all these talks. I keep listening to it, over the years, and I just remember. So I remember this talk was done somewhere in the Boston area. So you can look it up. So let's see. How to battle the struggle between societal and career expectations and self and spiritual care. The latter doesn't really pay the bills, but the latter is the one that is living. That's the one that is enjoying the journey. That's the one who's able to, you see the roses and, enjoy the sunsets, etc. If it's not for your health, guys, I don't know how I can say this loud and clear, that your ultimate investment is in your mental and physical well-being. And no matter what people tell you, if you didn't have that, then none of the other stuff matters. It'd be like, the Pahom story. Like, you've achieved all of this. You've got this massive piece of tract of land, and you fall, and then you succumb to the devil. You succumb to the thing, that greed that has pushed you to the place that you think is your source of happiness. So hopefully you can, reflect on that story that I shared. So definitely say that your self-care is important. Of course, like I said, there's a noble pursuit. Okay, this is the important thing. So I talked about the thing of what is the ambition. Ambition is really your passion. It's really your your natural state, of being. So we're all here to do something. We're all here to contribute something to this beautiful journey called life, right? We're here to share something with each other. If we tap into that natural state, it is something that comes out without effort. I've done this talk where I talk about the importance of the dance between making things happen and allowing things to happen. Some weeks ago, I did about, before I started this series on Insight Timer. You can go look it up on my YouTube channel, YouTube/J where I talk about that. I say that life is really a pursuit of perfecting that dance. How much do I push and how much do I allow? And if you think about it, all of nature is really a reflection of that. And when we can find that beautiful stride of pushing and allowing. I watched this very interesting TED Talk just yesterday, and I actually ended up having a meeting with that lady who did the TED Talk. Her name is Valerie Kaur, in which she talks about racism. And today we're sitting here where we hopefully have a bookend on an era of division, separation. And say, but we felt that we had that bookend. We felt that when 9/11 happened and all of that, the surge of the anti-foreigner, the xenophobic sentiment, and we thought we went through that ups and that down. But then what happened? 19 years later, we're still struggling with that. In which she brings about this analogy. She presents beautiful facts. And she talks about this analogy where she says it's like giving birth. You feel like you're dying. Just unending pain. It's a ring of fire, she calls it. And then the midwife says two things. Breathe and push. Breathe and push. Both are necessary for your survival, for the outcome, that beautiful thing that you're creating. Okay? So I'll leave you with that. Okay, let's see. So how do I help my high schooler achieve yet be mindful of her state of mind? So those three things I shared with you. Okay? So let's revise those three things. Setting the right kind of goals. Let's not get caught up and taken away, swept away by extrinsic goals. Let us ask ourselves intrinsic goals. What are intrinsic goals? Connection, meaning, and my contribution. How do I want to feel rather than what do I want to get? Right? A lot of times that feeling will guide you if you sit with it. The second, forfeiting perfectionism, because that is just another form of addiction. And third, I mentioned investing in relationships. Okay? So let's see. No one's really there fighting for you in the last garrison, though. No one except yourself. That is, no one except you. True, Bruce. Absolutely true. So really, the only one that you need to really care for, the only one that's going to stay there with you fighting till the end is you. So you're absolutely right. You're the one who's got your back until the last deed's done. Absolutely. So therefore, become your best friend. Self-compassion is, I can't say enough. Okay, how can one break through the warm and fuzzy parts of deepening the relationship if you're not naturally open and more guarded? That's a thing. Kay, whether you're male or female, that's a lifetime's worth of effort. And, here's where I say that, go to your gut instinct. Go to your gut instinct. And I'll tell you a very moving story from my own life. So the story is from about 15 years ago, 2004 thereabouts. I just moved to California. I was living in Austin, moved to California. And when I moved to California, I moved into an ashram. So many of you have probably read my bio. I was a monk for 18 years. And so when I moved into San Francisco, I moved into a meditation center. I lived with other celibate monks. And as it would have it, the timing was appropriate. this particular order had just purchased a retreat center north of San Francisco in a place called Marin County. And I became part of, by virtue of me landing there at the right time in the right place, I became a part of the initial family that basically created that retreat center, which today thrives there. So one day, I had a day job. So this particular order is, as even living as a monk, living in the ashram, you have day jobs because we don't charge anything for the service that we render. So the way we support the center is through the money that we make from our day jobs. So I would go to this retreat center on weekends and volunteer my time, typically go in on Friday night and come back on a Sunday night. So one Saturday morning, I'm cleaning up a trailer that was there. I was, in a bad shape. And I do some work inside and I come out of the trailer and there's a meadow in front of me. Lo and behold, there's a family of deer that are grazing in that meadow right outside where I come out of this trailer. So they see me and they have a startle response, right? So they see me, they're shocked, I see them, I'm shocked. I'm like, oh my God, what just happened here? Deer. They see me and say, oh my God, what just happened here? A human, right? So we make this eye contact and we are both frozen in our tracks. Then I said, you know what? If I make one move, I know what's going to happen. The deer are going to run for their dear life. They're going to be frightened by me. But I'm going to not make a move, but instead I'm going to do a little experiment. I said, okay, at that point I had been practicing meditation for about, give or take, 6 years. So I had learned some basics. And I said, I'm going to practice what it means to be soul conscious. So here's what I did. I dropped into the self and saw myself as a pure being of light. Inside of this flesh and bones, pure being of consciousness. A being that is fundamentally love. So here I am, with my visual, physical eyes, I'm looking at the deer, but in my third eye, I'm visualizing myself as a pure sentient being that's nothing but love. Within a few moments, the deer put their head back into the grass and started chewing, grazing as if nothing had happened. My proof from the universe of what I had been practicing. You know this thing about we create vibes? You know about how you sense the feelings in a particular place? That day it was proof to me that what you think is so powerful. It precedes what you say and what you do. Okay, so for that person, Mr. or Mrs. K, use your natural instinct like the deer did. We all have our sixth sense. It's vibrant. We just have to learn to tap it. And the beautiful things about these creatures without mouths, they say, voiceless creatures, we use that phrase, is actually they have a gift. Because they don't get into the voice, they don't get into talking and the chatter, they don't have the prefrontal cortex I talked a lot about in the last few weeks. They are still very deeply connected with their intuition, with their sixth sense, with their perception. And therefore, it becomes their way of being shielded, protected from danger. We all have it. Each one of us is born with it and we will die with it. We just need to enhance it by taking time in quiet contemplation. The more we are able to slow down our extrinsic, the five senses that are constantly, looking and trying to catch on to the next thing, the more we're enhancing that sixth sense. Okay. Great. Well, you're getting me into many, many stories today, you guys. Let's see. So thank you for love the book recommendation. Rami's asking, how do you find or cultivate these relationships? I often feel my friendships are superficial and the closest have hurt and betrayed me. Yes. Well, I did a whole session, Rami. You clearly did not attend my session on cultivating relationships. I please urge you. Now, I keep getting questions, I guess, along the same line. So here's what I want you to do. Go ahead and see, I just typed in something. So go ahead and say youtube.com/this, because it's interesting. Insight Timer does not allow me to share URLs. So I have to find ways, hacks like this to pass on, to be able to answer your questions. But go ahead and do this. So in there, go look up my relationships and connections talk. Okay. In that, I explain that. I say that, I share the story where, growing up, I grew up with cousins. I grew up with lots of neighbors. I played with them. I have obviously had a big set of classmates. And then yet when I go back to some of these gatherings, some of these, weddings, etc., I find myself like, these are my people by virtue of blood relationship or proximity or childhood upbringing, etc., but I don't belong here. Why is it that I feel this sense of disconnection when these people have been so intrinsically involved in shaping me to be who I am? Right there, I talk about, there was this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I go one step beyond and say, it's not just about this lifetime's needs and we evolving from our basal instincts into connections and then accumulating a name and prestige and then, going to the fifth layer where he talks about transcendence. I say about the journey across lifetimes. I talk about we picking up exactly where we left off in our last phase of the journey. And therefore, we are here to settle some karmic issues, but that does not by any way define these are the people vibing with me. No, I'm here to learn something from these people, but there is my tribe and therefore I seek out. That's why we're all here. I always call this a soulful tribe is because there is something about us as we sit down and as I'm sharing my stories and share stories in a powerful way because it triggers something within you that says, yes, I've been there. I know that feeling. I resonate with you. So we all seek out these tribes. And fortunately today with technology, by all of these means, we can find them far and wide. And there's all kinds of tribes out there. Right? So yeah, so I resonate with that, totally resonate with that. And like I said, I've done a whole thing on that. I think this is the age of light that is exposing the darkness. Of course, we are, we call it the age of Aquarius. There's this concept in ancient Eastern philosophy about the cycle of time, right? Because time is cyclical. It's kind of a unique concept, but just go with it for a second. So time is cyclical. Soul is eternal. So eternity means it's represented. The only way you can represent eternity is through a circle. And a circle could be divided into 4 quadrants, so like 4 pieces of a pie. So in Eastern philosophies, there is a very strong notion that there is a golden age, Satyuga, Treta Yuga, Silver Age, Copper Age, and then they come the dark, cold night of winter, the Kali Yuga. Some of you may have heard that. And after the bitter, cold night of winter, when you feel that all of hope is gone, there's not a single leaf left on the tree, as long as you keep hope, as long as you keep breathing, as long as you keep faith alive, there will be the dawn of the beautiful day of spring. Such is the nature of all cycles. Okay? So, in Eastern philosophy, this particular time is also true in the Mayan civilization. They talk about the end of one cycle and the beginning of the next. There's the concept of the Sangam Yuga, the confluence age, the confluence between the old that is dying and decaying and the birth of the beautiful new day of spring, the beautiful new golden era. And they say the only effort we as individuals, right? We can't stop it, we can't change any of this. This is just the eternal truth of nature of the cycle of time. But there's only one preparation I as an individual can make, which is making myself compatible, making myself worthy, making myself prepared for this beautiful new day of spring, that my values and the values of so-called paradise, heaven on earth, Bahisht, it's called different things in different religions, that my vibration, my frequency needs to align with the frequency of the age of Aquarius. Okay? That concept is especially helpful and relevant to this time. Yes, it is indeed. Love is light. It is indeed. We are love and we are light. All right, folks, so why don't we dive into a meditation as we move along to the next phase of this journey we are on together. So before I want you to, we've been sitting here and talking, you've been listening to me for the last hour or so, so why don't we do a little stretch exercise before we jump into this? So what I want you to do is take a nice big shoulder roll. So go ahead as you're breathing in, pick up your shoulders, bringing your shoulders as close to your ears as you possibly can, stretching them as far back, and as you're exhaling, dropping them completely. Repeat this a couple more times with me. Picking up your shoulders as you breathe in, stretching them as far back, and exhale as you're dropping your shoulders as far low as they can possibly go. One last time in this direction before we reverse directions. Now, reversing directions, pick up and drop. Breathing in as you're lifting up your shoulders, and exhaling as you can exhale with your mouth. And inhale with your nostrils one last time, and exhale with your mouth. And then I invite you to go ahead and close your eyes. If you feel so comfortable, keep them open. If you don't feel comfortable, let us dive into the heart space. Taking in some nice, deep, comfortable breaths. Breathing into your belly, not into your chest. Continuing the breathing. Noticing the flow of air as it passes in through your nostrils, into your windpipe, going down deep into the very bottom of your lungs. And as you exhale, you let go of what the body does not need, which comes out as a warm breath. And in today's meditation, I'm going to teach you how to engage in a conversation between your mind and your intellect. The mind is the incessant factory of thoughts. And your intelligence is the decision maker. It decides what's useful or not, what's right or wrong, what's worthy or not. While the mind thinks, your intellect knows. The role of the intellect is to learn, to decide, and also to see. This is what you refer to as your third eye. When you can see something with your mind's eye, you're actually seeing with your intellect. And in this conversation between the mind and the intellect, we're going to ask a question. The mind is going to throw a question on the screen of the mind, and then it's going to wait and wait for the intellect to answer. And when your intellect answers, it does so with a visual. So let's give ourselves time to see the response rather than just think about it. And I ask that for this next 5 minutes or so, try to be completely aligned with this journey I'm taking you down. Avoiding any distractions if possible. So if a distraction comes up, just tell yourself you acknowledge it, but I'll just come back to it later because I'm on a journey right now in this particular direction. So in this next 5 minutes, I'll be asking you 5 questions, and then I'm going to pause, giving you a chance to ask for that answer to arise naturally within your intellect. And then I'm going to share my answer, not because it has to match with yours, only to offer as a template for those who are very new to this practice. So I'm not asking you to conform, but I'm just offering a suggestion. So the first question: who am I really? I am a spiritual being on this human experience. Second, what is my true form? I am a tiny spark of consciousness. Question number 3. What is my core value? My core value is love. I am a being of love. Number 4. What is my purpose on this earth? My purpose is to be inspired and to inspire to be the best versions of ourselves. Number 5. Where have I come from? Or what's my true home? I, the being of light, have come from a world of light, far beyond the hustle and bustle of this world of action. From a realm of deep peace complete silence. And absolute stillness. And I see myself suspended as a tiny diamond in that world of light. Golden red light. And in my home of light, I feel completely comfortable with who I am. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. No one to prove to. I am beautiful and powerful exactly as I am. And in this silence, I feel rested. I feel realigned with myself. And when it's time to come into this world of action and sound, I bring forth my true spirit, my authentic self, and my loving presence. And this home of light is available to me anytime, anywhere. Just a thought away. It's your secret sanctuary. And from this place of stillness and alignment, ask yourself this question: what do I value the most in my life? What do I value the most in my life? And just whenever you're ready, I invite you to come back into this physical circle. And I ask that you please share as succinctly as you can, what is it that you value the most in life? Jonathan says to be alive. AJ says health. CM saying family. Personal freedom and health. Peace. Yes, peace again. Wonderful. So as these answers are coming up, if you have any outstanding questions, anything that you haven't had a chance to ask, something that's burning before we end today, I invite you to go ahead and please type it here. I also want to say that this is what I do full time, and your donations go a long way in supporting everything that I'm able to produce and publish. I'm working on my new series on forgiveness, which should be hopefully live and running on the 1st of January. It's a 10-day course that I'm working on recording, and I'm trying to make this available. So your donations go towards helping me to pay my music director, the fellow who does my sound mixing and the videos that you see on YouTube. It also goes towards the lady who puts out my daily Instagram posts, social media posts on Facebook, etc. Yeah, she's in the Philippines. My sound engineer is in Colombia. I have a web designer in India. And, these have been very interesting times. So every bit of your donations goes a long way in supporting this entire ecosystem. Thank you very much. And I ask that, again, like I said in the last few times, find a way to share this, find a way to complete this cycle if you've received, find a way to give it, because otherwise you will not be in a position to receive more. These things don't stick. This is a karmic cycle that, there's a give and there needs to be a take. There needs to be a constant flow of energy. So find your own way, folks. And I just want to say that, a friend reached out to me yesterday and he says he's been volunteering at the San Francisco soup kitchen, and they have been serving out 80,000 meals a week. Sit with that for a second. And they're short of volunteers. So if you cannot give in cash, there's definitely ways in which you can give in kind. Of course, be careful, take your precautionary measures. But just find ways. These are times where, people are looking for a little bit of hope, a little shoulder to lean on, and some amount of a sense of, people care, right? So go ahead and please be that beacon of light, be that little spark in somebody's darkness, and find your own way to do it. So let's see. So people said relationships, my awareness, peace, love, and life. Great. I value most my connection to the self and well-being as well as my relationships. Okay, so I got a question here. Do you believe we are in the stage of the throat chakra element of life of imagination? So my practice, I talked about that extensively in one of my sessions. Again, please go to my YouTube channel. I talked about the chakras and how it aligns with the different forms of yogas and how we can use the different colors of the spectrum to heal or to nourish these different energy centers, which is the chakras of the body. And in my practice has been fundamentally Raja Yoga. And the Raja Yoga this is the time. There's a very famous shloka that opens the Bhagavad Gita, which is the ancient text of the Hindus. It says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyudhanam adharmasya taratmanam shajanmiyam. So I'm going to translate that into plain, simple English. It says, when there is complete darkness of irreligiousness, when humanity has completely lost its way, lost its connection with dharma. Dharma means what is my primary principle, action for which I've come here to, my purpose with which I've come here to live as a human being. When I'm in that complete darkness of ignorance, then so this is the Supreme Being speaking, God speaking, and says, I have to come to show you your path, show you your way. And so that is the opening shloka, and the rest of the Bhagavad Gita goes into talking about the rest of how the humanity needs to understand ultimately who am I, who do I belong to, my connection with source, and then what is my purpose. So these are the three major takeaways, if you will, from the Bhagavad Gita. And in that, there is the concept of opening your third eye. Ultimately, all of yoga, all of the channeling of energy is you're working your way through the different energy centers and opening of the third eye to connect with the Supreme Being. And then you let that light that you are, let that light become one with you, and then you become a conduit as you bring that light into this world. So in my practice, Jonathan, this is the time for us to be in union with the divine and become the instruments. And I like a friend of mine, he uses this analogy is that we are the flutist. If you know that, there's this thing where God is shown as the flutist, in which we are that instrument. And let us be so clean and clear that any whisper that is blown through the flute comes out as sheer music. That the gopis, they show that there are these, the maidens and the people of the village start getting into this intoxicating dance because of this enchanting music that is shown as the gopi vallabh. The gopis are the ones who are the maidens who are out there, doing their work in the fields, and then they hear the music and they're so enamored by the music that they get into this ecstatic dance. And let us become that instrument for the divine to play that music. So thank you all. I see the donations coming in. I really appreciate that. So thank you all for the questions. Thank you all for staying here with me. We are about an hour and a half into this conversation. It's always so fulfilling to me. This is one of my pinnacles of the whole week. And like I said, this is my soul tribe. I've been stuck at home for the last 9 months, like I assume most of you have. So to me, this is just a beautiful way to connect, and it's a beautiful way for me to share community, share this space. I'll see all these beautiful hearts streaming on my screen here. It is such a fulfilling experience to align with you here on these Wednesday nights. Wednesday for me, Thursday for some of you on the other side of the globe. So let's see, how to sleep deep to calm your anxious brain. Yes, Jay, that was my talk last week. Definitely check it out. There was about 250 of us here last week. And it's just a very, very fundamental conversation. I invite you to do that. And so this brings us to the end of this week. Next week, I'm going to talk about step 6 of the 7 steps towards overcoming anxiety. And next week is another very important one. It's about exercise and the role of being in nature. Can we listen to the talk from last week? Where do we find it? Grace Ann. So please, I'm going to repeat this. So it's youtube.com, but they don't allow me to do .coms here. So I'm going to go ahead and type in what I can, and I want you to kind of make sense of it. Go ahead and try to put this in. I don't know, can you guys see this? I just put in a sort of a kind of a URL there, youtube.com/jchodagam. So take out the spaces and I put a .com after the YouTube. And then you could go ahead and watch this talk that I did last week about how to sleep deep to calm your anxious brain. Okay, so let's see, Jonathan, you're asking, write down your thoughts to put them to rest so you sleep. Yes, so that's called offloading. So I use that a lot, both not only for at sleeping time, but also when I wake up and I meditate. It's offloading the intellect with the list. If you can't meditate and you can be peaceful and still try to remember stuff. So yes, I highly suggest you offload it onto. I do this all the time. I keep a notebook next to me when I'm meditating, because some of my most brilliant, groundbreaking ideas come when I'm actually in deep peace, because you're completely aligned with the soul and with all of your depth and your wisdom. And so you're bound to come out, but you don't want to be sitting with the heaviness. Oh my God, I want to sit for some more time, but then I might forget this. It's a good idea to offload them and put them down on a piece of paper. So folks, with that, I want to thank you all for being here with me. I'll see you all same channel, same time, same place next week. Until then, be safe and be well.